These pigeons belong to William D. Cargill of Fort Worth. They are show birds and not the street pigeons that Fort Worth has such a problem with in the downtown area. Raising and breeding prize pigeons is an expensive process, and a good bird is worth a lot of money. It can be worth into the thousands of dollars. Mr. Cargill likes his pigeons and cares for them with meticulous precision. Naturally, he's upset at the thought of the passage of the city ordinance that would restrict the number of birds he owns. I asked him what effect the ordinance would have on his flock.
It means that I'll have to get rid of 1/4 of them. I have 40, and the ordinance only allows 30. So I'd have to eliminate 10. Plus, it would destroy the breeding program for the next season. Since I already have the maximum, I couldn't breed any more to compete in the next shows. Specifically, I'd like to compete in the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show this coming February and the following year. Now, my pigeons are not the nation's best by any means. So far, the best I've ever won in the show is the second place. But I have hopes of breeding better ones. In other words, I hope my next year's crop are better than this year's crop.
As for the common street pigeons and all the bad jokes that go with them, Cargill says he'd just as soon help the city get rid of them. But he says the ones in the cage are the good ones in the white hats. And if they have to move out of Fort Worth, he'll move right along with them. Jay Lewis, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
Breathing is going to be a little easier tomorrow around the Dixie Lead Company. Today is the last day that the firm will be allowed to emit excessive lead smelter fumes into the Dallas skies.
Jerry, we feel like we're going to have a better basketball team than we had last year. We're still a relatively young team. Gene Phillips will be our only senior that will be starting. We'll have a number of junior boys and sophomore kids.
Could you name a starting five?
If we had to play tonight, Jerry, we'd start Bobby Rollins and Larry Dalzell to guards, Gene Phillips and David Miller to forwards, and Steve Putnam at center.
Who are some of the outstanding teams in the conference that you'll be facing?
We feel like that Rice is probably the favorite. They have 4 starters back and a couple or 3 outstanding sophomores coming up. They're the defending champions, and they'll be hard to beat. Of course, Texas A&M is going to be a real big ball club, and they'll be a contender, and I'm sure Texas Tech will be right in the middle of it as a contender. Texas probably will be right behind this group.
I think you could say that there's in the two business enterprises that we are chatting about here, Alcorn in particular, there's a number of different opportunities for a company such as that. And the leasing business is in itself a multi-billion dollars type of operation, and you can take that from there and go with it if you like. And there's a lot of other business enterprises that let me just say differently. I've probably been contacted by over 200 small businessmen and major businesses, when you say out of the top 200, of some sort of identification, some sort of investment, some sort of management, or some combination of all those things. And we'll begin to screen those and look at them now. Major companies, I say with in excess of 100 million in sales, would like some sort of identification with the new enterprise. I'm not sure we can be helpful. We certainly would not get involved unless we could be helpful to the new business enterprise. Well, I don't think I could be too specific at the moment. Thank goodness this company is privately owned, and thus I'm not bound or constricted by the rules and regulations of New York or Stock Exchange or the SEC. But on the other hand, University Computer is publicly owned, and thus anything I might say may have a bearing on their situation, so thus I don't think I should comment at the moment. People certainly are doing the job as they see fit, as they think they should do, and I think when the book's written about this particular situation, I think history will give fair play and an accurate description of what happened. And the book has not yet been written, or the final chapter certainly has not been written on it.
This is on the ordinance itself. The motion was made by Councilman Cadane and seconded by Councilman Meyer. Councilman Payne? Aye. Aye. Councilman Allen? No. No. Councilman Meyer? Aye. Aye. Councilman Martinez? Aye. Aye. Councilman Wise? No. No. Councilman Cadane? No. No. Aye. You made the motion. Councilman Cadane votes aye. Councilman Holland? Aye. Aye. Councilman Price? No. No. Councilman Weber? Aye. Aye. Councilman McKinney? Aye. Aye. And the mayor?
Aye.
Aye. 2-0.
Six months ago, the firm was granted a variance by the Texas Air Control Board to continue operating without prosecution until November 30th, as long as emissions did not exceed 200 micrograms of pollutants per cubic meter of atmosphere. The lawful standard is 100 micrograms. Dan Burleson of the Air Control Board in Austin told us that the Dixie Lead has been making considerable progress in the past months to reduce pollutants in its operations. Cecil Bassett, owner of Texas Lead, confirmed that the company would be in full compliance with the pollution restrictions by tomorrow. When the Air Control Board meets again December 10th, 3 other companies in the area which are now operating beyond the 100 microgram limit will be heard. American Manufacturing and McKinley Ironworks of Fort Worth will petition for a variance, and the Trinity Valley Iron and Steel, also of Fort Worth, will ask for an extension of their grace time. 2 of these requests are expected to be denied by a board that's cracking down on air pollution. This is Judy Hanna for Channel 8 News on the Move.
He's a man of very deep and abiding compassion without any sense being weak about it. He's a man with great vision without being just a pure dreamer. He's a man of firm resolve without being in the least dictatorial. He's a man who has a conscience and who has a sense of values of what is important in this world.
it is in the opinion of the councilman that they should have more time for study of the report, I think it should be granted. However, I believe that they have had enough time for the study. And the Taylor report, in my estimation, has had a lot of sound thinking, has had fundamental principles that are adaptable to the telephone company's responsibility as well as the public utility responsibility.
Do you feel that the public is ready for some decision on this by the council?
I believe so. In fact, I've had pro and con on it. Some people don't want their telephone rates raised, and others, I've had more calls about service to the telephone company than I have had that they didn't want the rate raised.
If you're unlucky enough to have to visit Tarrant County Jail and be behind bars here, chances are good that you might have to sleep on the floor or even eat sitting on the floor. And it's not a case of bad treatment. It's just that there's not enough room here for all the prisoners. Sheriff Lon Evans says that Tarrant County commissioners are aware of the situation and that it has been critical for several years. Yet the commissioners have not responded to the sheriff's request for more space. I asked County Judge Howard Green today if the commissioners have any plans at all for expansion of the jail.
The only plans that we have to expand the county jail would be to ask the voters of this county to approve a bond issue of probably $1,300,000. We don't have the money without a bond issue to complete the 3 floors of the jail, and so then it would be our responsibility to ask the voters to approve the bond issue, and that would give us space for 150 additional prisoners.
Sheriff Evans says 1 or even 2 more floors of jail cells are needed now, and the overcrowded conditions here are said to be conducive to a possible riot. Only last week here, several prisoners were placed in solitary confinement because they set their mattresses on fire, and Warden Rook Ramsey says that incident was caused directly by the overcrowding conditions. Jim Green, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
I'm afraid that its willingness to circumvent this ceasefire as well as to circumvent the United Nations will tend to corroborate the Arab general suspicion that they are using the ceasefire as well as the nebulous statements in order to prevent the Arabs from being prepared for the confrontation that they are planning for. And there are now evidence of a build-up by Israel on the eastern part of the Suez.
Now, the Taylor report has given the straight line residential $6.35. The telephone company was asking for $6.60. The two-party residential, the Taylor report was $4.90, the same as the telephone company, and the extension was the same. Now, in these areas, in these three areas that I have just spoken about, there is a possibility of some compromise in that area.
Well, it's